other reasons, because he was not only dealing with hostile adversaries who were trying to play gotcha with him in the persons of Jim Jordan and other Republicans on the committee, but also because he is hamstrung because he, to this date, is not able to comment on volume 2 of his report involving the Mar-a-Lago prosecution. And that remains bottled up by, guess who? Judge Eileen Cannon down in the Southern District of Florida, who just kept it on ice for a year with no explanation and now is giving Trump and the other 2 co-defendants there a chance to protest and not have it released. Their interests, I'll just say, are completely swamped by the public interest at this point. And indeed, it's part of the ongoing theme of Trump's trying so hard and that in a dastardly way to keep all the information from coming to light for the public, for history, for the democracy, having defeated the prosecutions themselves because of his election. This is the sort of subsidiary agenda. Okay, so they bring Smith in. Smith, remember, wanted it to be an open hearing, and he still is angling for that, perhaps with the aid now of the minority, the Democrats on the committee, who are not letting this go, especially Jamie Raskin. But it's a terrible situation in general for all witnesses, because not only is the narrow Republican majority in lockstep and doing Trump's bidding and more than willing to distort the record and prevaricate, you have the DOJ in the background. So if for whatever reason they have a party line vote saying we're holding Jack Smith in contempt because, we don't like the color of his tie, or in this case, he didn't cooperate enough, that gets referred out to the Department of Justice, which could only too happily jump all over it, as it has with Comey and James and the like. So they're really between a rock and a hard place when called on by the Congress. That's the dynamic that's going to continue for the next several months, even as the minority, the Dems, try to make some headway. So the transcript itself, it is predictable, had a chance to look very quickly, and let me give the basics as was reported at the time. Why is that? If it was sealed, because Congress leaks like a sieve. But we had some top line reports, and they indeed proved to be correct. Smith insists first that they indicted. They didn't start the process thinking or prejudging whether they would indict or not. And in both cases of the indictments against Trump, they decided within a lot of collaboration, not long before the actual indictments were drafted and presented to the grand jury. Moreover, the indictment satisfied the then principles of federal prosecution. This is coming off as kind of brassy on Smith's part, but it isn't. It's just by the book. He said that there was evidence to convict him beyond a reasonable doubt. That factor, separate from is he guilty, is actually a requirement of the principles of federal prosecution, which requirements seem to have been shredded and thrown out the window, because especially in these vindictive prosecutions, the current DOJ is bringing cases that they almost certainly haven't concluded, or could not honestly have concluded a conviction is probable beyond a reasonable doubt and a unanimous jury. That's actually the prevailing standard in the professional Department of Justice that we've left behind, but that Jack Smith completely played by the book. So he averred repeatedly, no, he was believed strongly that he not only was guilty, but it could be proven. A second big point and a theme is these decisions were made by him. Under the framework, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, could have overruled him, but that would have triggered certain procedural requirements, notification, and the like, and he did not. So Smith is very clear and express. These are all his decisions, of course, in collaboration with his staff. Okay, he's pressed a lot on why do you think Trump was guilty of the charges that you brought against him. And he said, look, and he had this, really completely anticipated all the questions and was loaded for bear on all of them. What did Trump do on January 6th to justify the 4 charges against him? He caused, exploited, and foresaw the violence that he put into motion, even if he didn't exactly order it up. It doesn't matter for the statutes he was accused of violating. First, he used false claims of the elections having been stolen from him. And then he totally harnessed, he basically, as we all saw, revved up his supporters with these false claims and set them loose, knowing that the violence that ensued very possibly would ensue. That is enough. And he's questioned quite a bit about, well, isn't this just political speech by Trump? And you've tried to criminalize his political speech. And A, that's a garbage argument. And B, Smith is completely ready for it. He says, no, there's a difference between political speech and speech that is designed to, and in fact, has the clear and present danger of revving people up to do violence. Here, that's exactly what happened. So you know that it's pretty easy to show was that kind of speech. And when you're talking about that, all the First Amendment protections, including for political speech, go out the window. And so there's no protection here. And again, it matters in terms of the level of constitutional protection that all this is fraud. All of it is falsehoods. All of it is lies. Trump's continued insistence that is the gas-a-hole to his supporters to get them all revved up, that the election was stolen, always was bullshit. Not a word that Jack Smith, the punctilious, methodical Jack Smith, used in front of the Congress. Okay, 2 other things we now know he was questioned about pretty carefully. One, what about all these co-conspirators? There are 6 or 7. Why didn't you charge them? And the inference is that somehow he was just on the warpath against Trump, and he again parried it with no problem. And for what seems to be true, in fact, the very point I made when the indictment was returned, and I said, the most important is the caption, Donald Trump only. So there's a lot of co-conspirators here, and in a different world in which Trump doesn't come to power again and dismiss everything, it would have followed through. But he wanted to streamline, that's his word, the case with the overwhelming evidence against Trump. And had he put all the other co-conspirators there, there's all kinds of ways they could have tied things up and really held it hostage for weeks, months, even more. So that's the reason there. And then finally, they are all up in arms and hot and bothered are the members of Congress about his subpoenaing of toll records of theirs. And that's just a complete bogus issue. First, they seem to be completely confused and think that their phone conversations were tapped. You can do that under law, but it's Title III, a huge difference showing. What he did instead, and you can do by subpoena, is got the records themselves. So at 2:15, Jim Jordan called Mark Meadows. The call called such and such a number, which we know is Mark Meadows. The call lasted for 2.5 minutes. It's that kind of information. And it is an essential, automatic, no-brainer investigative step. Even if all you're thinking about is Trump, and by the way, in that other universe I described, there are certainly, I think, some members of Congress who would eventually be at least subjects or targets of the investigation, starting with Scott Perry. But even if you're only thinking about Trump, you want to construct what happens January 6th. There are all these calls from members of Congress to Mark Meadows. You want to know about them. You want to know who they are, etc. Absolutely an orthodox move, would have been malpractice not to do it. So he explains that to them, and they had, all this on their high horse and how they're being spied on, and under the assumption, which, they bring to the table, that the case is bogus anyway, the main submission that Smith coolly bats away again and again and again. The other thing to add here is and when this comes out, I think I want to have some pressure in the public eye. He again and again says, I'm really constrained in what I can say because Volume 2 is still under wraps. I think that testimony could serve to give some pressure for it to be disclosed itself. Of course, Eileen Cannon seems to respond to one person only, but that's where things stand. So now public. He insisted on the video, did Smith, because he didn't want them messing around and doing ellipses and different kinds of tendentious editing of the transcript. Now they have the video. He has weathered the storm of having them have Adam behind closed doors as they insisted, and he resisted. And now we'll see whether, with the aid of members of the minority, especially Jamie Raskin, he can step forward, as he continues to want to do, and publicly testify in front of the American people and put the lie, it's just certainly a lie, to the claim that the Republicans continue rashly to advance again and again, that somehow this was a political prosecution, a weaponization of the Biden Justice Department and the like. Totally bogus, and ironically so, since it's, of course, just what the Trump DOJ is doing and just what Jack Smith, a very solid career prosecutor, did not do. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later. Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about the DC bomber case. Brian Cole, the man who confessed to putting pipe bombs out front of the DNC and the RNC on January 5th, and in his confession basically embraced a Trumpian narrative